I got mine out.
Oh, there she is.
Right in the middle.
Yeah, right in front.
When Tim and Debbie
even
each other
She's
out.
within striking distance.
You guys tend to even each other out. Make sure we're on even keel here. Not too far one way or the other.
All right.
Counterweights.
Let's write something else here.
Do it online. I did.
Debbie.
Dan,
Oh.
did you switch your seats?
I'll sit down.
Oh, yeah, you're supposed to be every other one. You gotta switch back. He won't leave.
Afterwards, but you had said you postpones.
Yes.
You did see my email about. Yes.
I just sat down and didn't switch to
Should have
the
brought
next
them to
plate.
you.
Before we get
Good job,
started, I want to
Serena.
remind everyone to keep the mics in your mouth when you're speaking. If it doesn't pick it up, then we won't have.
And then put it away.
Are we ready to begin? Is everyone present? All right. Well, welcome to the City of the Dalles Budget Committee meeting, May 1st, 2023. This is in the City Hall Council Chambers at 313 Court Street. This agenda will serve for all subsequent budget committee meetings until the budget is approved. Agenda will resume where meetings are recessed. Approval of minutes will be added as they are prepared for approval. A quick reminder, please turn off all our silence cell phones. I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Lynn Ring.
Here.
Scott Randall,
Present.
Debbie Ferrer,
Present.
Tim McLaughlin,
Present.
Sandy Hatchroll.
Hey, Kroll.
Hakroll.
Hey, Kroll. I'm here.
Serena Smith,
Here.
Dan Richardson.
Here.
Rod Runyon isn't here, and Darcy Long is not. Mayor Mays is also in attendance.
Good job. Our first order of business, I'd like to say something about a reminder that this is not money that belongs to us tonight that we're spending. This belongs to our taxpayer base, and we are the stewards of that money. We need to elect a chair and a secretary. That's our first order of business. So I will open it up for nominations for chair.
Yeah.
That's one option.
Second.
We have a motion that, yeah, they're pointing at me. Is there anyone else that would like to assume this position? Please. All right. Without hearing that, let's have a consensus. All in favor of myself being your president or chair, raise your hand or say aye.
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 Anyone that abstains or votes nay. So I hear no nays. So let's select a secretary, please. Open for nominations for secretary.
Can you remind us what the secretary's duties are?
I will ask the city clerk to do that for us.
The secretary signs the minutes after they're approved.
Would you like to do that?
I nominate Debbie Ferrer.
Go. All right. I have a nomination on the floor. Do we have a
I
second?
second that.
All right, then we have, we don't have any debates, so we'll go ahead. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that's carried. So you are now the secretary.
Thank you for your interest.
We're moving on to number 4, budget message fiscal year 2023-24. I assume this will be our manager, Matthew Cleaves. The Honorable Matthew Cleaves. I guess.
So, thank you, Chair. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I added that.
Appreciate it. At the city clerk just wanted me to note at the beginning here that tonight's budget presentations, we will be having the airport and the police department first. Schedule conflict there, and so we will start with here. For my budget message, I wanted to start by saying that, as you all know, this budget represents a tremendous amount of work, not only by the finance department, city staff, but also community volunteers such as yourself who participate on the budget committee, as well as council, various city, as well as the vision action plan that. The efforts of that vision action plan and the city council goal setting session all play a tremendous role in guiding that departments together. If you look through your budget book, which I also assume you have, you'll notice right out of the gate that there has been a substantial formatting line shift. If you looked at prior budgets that the city of Dalles has had, or concern on the past and those things that you notice, then big thanks to the finance department for undertaking a lot of that effort. And it was really designed to help convey not only give a facelift to the budget book itself, but help better convey some of the narratives, timelines, data. Following the budget message, we'll have a financial overview, which again, some of the departure from years past, where the budget message is a little bit more all-encompassing. My budget message this evening is only 2 pages. So it's really highlights some of those notable trends, the issues and projects that are part of this effort. So the financial overview following this budget message will detail some of the major revenues, expenditures, and the overall general fund, public works fund, etc., which will be followed by individual department presentations at each budget. Starting in the budget message, that there were some of the guiding policies that I wanted to all of you. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's some of the key points that I want to highlight about maintaining an appropriated ending general fund balance that equals 4 months of net operating expenditure. Maintain a general fund contingency at least 20%. Maintain 5-year capital improvement plans. Base our administrative service transfer as charges for service provided to the company. And then following in my budget message, I structured it based off of the goals that the city has. Brief summary with infrastructure, partnerships, economic development, sustainable government, and parent government. And so for few key aspects of each one of them. Starting with infrastructure, looking at the street department and maintaining a $750,000 transfer to maintain and reach our pavement management index targets. The creation of a new facility supervisor position and the transfer of capital into a capital project fund to support that position and address some of the maintenance items not only at city facilities, but the city hall, police department, but also some of the public infrastructure that we have throughout the community separate from public works, meaning public infrastructure such as Lewis and Clark Park, roundabout downtown, and some of the other infrastructure that has been built over time. For partnerships, we'll still be providing support to the Wasco County District Attorney's Office, as well as financial services to Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue. We do expect a transition with the Parks and Rec Department, as well as a multitude of different partner entities that we'll get into more detail. Programs. For economic development, we created the economic development officer position that will really serve to have a dedicated focus on economic development issues as well as partnership with other entities that work in this area, such as the Dalles Main Street, Airport, Chamber of Commerce, etc. We also hope to secure an AmeriCorps RARE volunteer. RARE stands for Resource Assistance for Rural Environments. That application was submitted back in April and contingent upon funding approval. And going through their interview process, we would hope to have a RARE selected and starting maybe sometime in September. And then for sustainable government, I wanted to highlight that we recently or last year completed the police union contract negotiations and hope to finalize SEIU contract negotiations here soon. and wanted to highlight that we continue to leverage a number of different grants in almost every city department. And so we'll hear more about those different grants and the projects that they support at the individual department presentations. And then finally, for transparent government, I wanted to highlight that we expect to see a return of the local government academy in fiscal year 23-24. And I think that will be a really great way. We have some graduates from the local government academy serving on our budget committee. And I think that's an excellent program to bring back to seek engagement with our community and help them become involved in their own local government. And so with that, diving in, at the end of each kind of section, I'll make sure to pause. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them as we can complete each section of the budget. And I think that sums up my budget. If there are any questions?
You said you said there was a transition with Parks and Rec. Something's changing?
Yeah, so we currently provide financial services to the Parks and Rec taxing district. We will likely see a transition in those services to a different entity. They'll receive financial services from a different entity rather than the city going forward. But we'll continue to provide those financial services to Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue.
What's this new entity?
I believe that the new entity that may be providing service to Parks and Rec is Mid-Columbia Economic Development District.
Okay, so we need to move on to number 5, which is a motion to certify City of the Dalles tax rate of $3.0155 per 1,000 of assessed value. May I entertain a motion?
I'll move to certify the City of the Dalles tax rate of 3.0155 per 1,000 of assessed value.
All right, and do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Scott, Randall, Councilor Randall, seconds. Is there any discussion before we take a vote? Any discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and verify this by saying all in favor, raise your right hand or say yay.
Yay.
Okay, any opposed? Hearing none, this motion is carried. All right. Now, do we have individual departments presenting? No. So we go to public hearing. So I have a script that needs to be read, correct? All right, now is the time for public hearing to take testimony from the public regarding City of the Dalles proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-24 and use of state shared revenue. I will open the public hearing and ask for staff report. Following the staff report, I will call for testimony from audience. At the conclusion of the testimony, the public hearing will be closed. All right, at this point, let's see, ask for staff report. So we're going to start with the airport, correct?
No, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no staff report to go along at this section of the budget.
Okay,
Public hearing to receive testimony.
so is there anyone in the audience that would like to give public testimony for or against this budget? Hearing and seeing none, then I will go ahead and should we close the public testimony? Yes, this testimony is closed. All right. The public hearing is now closed. So we move on to the next. Okay, public hearing. I'm looking on it. So now we move into taking testimony or for reports from department heads, correct? Oh, we need a motion?
Second public hearing.
No, I don't have that particular.
Or use of state revenue sharing.
C, let me read it. All right.
B.
B, public hearing to receive testimony regarding use of state revenue sharing. That's the next thing. So we need a motion to recommend sharing, state revenue sharing. Is there a motion?
So if I may,
Yep.
Chair, if I can direct the budget committee's attention to page 16.
16 on the booklet. Ugh. Yes,
So detailed here in this section is the overview of state shared revenues. And so as you can see, state revenue sharing law, ORS 221.770 requires cities to pass stating that they elect to receive sharing money during the next fiscal year. And some of the sources of that different revenue are detailed at the bottom of this page. You'll see highway trust funds revenue, liquor, cigarette, and marijuana revenue. And so typically we have used these funds for a certain purpose. And that statement is usually very kind of a broad statement that support activities and help balance the general fund. And so that's kind of that snapshot and summary of state revenue sharing.
and listed are use for highway trust fund revenue, liquor revenue, cigarette tax revenue, and marijuana revenue,
Those are the sources of revenue.
sources of revenue, yes. All right. So we need to go ahead and hear a motion to recommend the acceptance of state revenue sharing. Yep. Oh, I need to ask for testimony. Do I need to read that portion of the testimony again? I will do that. All right. Now is the time for a public hearing to take testimony from the public regarding the City of the Dalles proposed budget and use of state shared revenues. I will open the public hearing and ask for staff report. Following the staff report, I will call for testimony from audience. At the conclusion of the testimony, the public hearing will be closed. Correct?
There is no staff report.
No staff report. So I need to ask for any input from the audience. Is there any input, testimony to be given?
Hand up.
Oh, I can't see that behind me.
Oh, that's you. Never mind.
Beyond that.
That's me. You're okay.
It's her
Oh.
cursor.
All right.
Sorry.
No sweat. So you'll need to tell me who is asking for or wanting to give testimony. Do you see any? Okay, so hearing none from the public, then we will go ahead and entertain a motion to move on this proposal. Do I have a motion?
I move to recommend proposed uses of state shared revenue to city council.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second. Is there any debate or any discussion on this matter? We need to accept this. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone that opposes it, same signal. All right, this passes. All right, that's the conclusion of the public hearings. Now, do we need to take input from department heads? Is this the point?
No, the next segment of the agenda is set future meetings, I believe.
I see. We're going to follow that. All right. So if we need a second, if we should complete all of the proceedings tonight, then there would be no need for a second. But normally what we've done in the past, we've just continued on to the next night at the same time. So if that should be required, then that's what is proposed. Anyone object to that? All right, seeing no objections to it. So we will continue if necessary tomorrow night at 5:30, same location. Now we need to approve minutes as needed. Do we have any? Okay, then that's not on the agenda. Budget presentations by fund. And at this point, we're going to start with the airport.
So I'm going to give a brief overview. As I detailed in my budget message, we have the two-page budget message highlighting those notable projects and trends and things that we wanted to highlight in particular. Starting with an overview of the budget itself, I'd like to direct you to page 1 of the budget book. You will see an organizational chart there. Start with. Technically page 2. And so here I wanted to just simply direct you to the organizational flow chart that we have here for the city of the Dalles. With voters who elect the mayor and city council. Mayor and city council who are engaged with hiring the city manager, municipal judge, and city attorney. And the city manager overseeing the various departments that we have here at the city, broken down into each of their divisions for your reference there. I'd also like to note that the city population is currently estimated at about 16,488 people, which is the basis for a lot of the different calculations that we use in the budget book, including state revenue sharing. And I'd like to turn it over to our finance director, Angie Wilson, here to review the process, the budget process overview itself, budget calendar, and then I will dive into the financial overview that begins on page 7.
Good evening. On page 5 is your budget process overview. As you all are pretty much aware of, this budget is to establish standard procedures for preparing, presenting, and administering the budget of the Oregon local governments. When we are putting together the budget, we are doing it in the best faith at what we think that we're going to be receiving in estimated revenues and estimated expenditures and proposed taxes at that time. Again, this is just a budget of what we think that we will be receiving. Sometimes throughout the year, things change. That's why we do the contingencies. We keep a balanced budget. Our revenues match our appropriations. And this evening and tomorrow night, as long as the meetings will take us, we like to get input from the budget committee. It's very important to be able to get your guys' input and what you guys feel that's going to be best for the city. And once the budget is approved, we put the approved budget together, we bring it back to council where they adopt the budget at that time. And on page 6, you'll see the calendar of approving, adopting the budget. And then July 1st, we implement the budget to the new year. So our fiscal year is July 1 through June 30th. That's it.
Okay, so the next section here, turning to page 8, brief revenue, financial overview. A couple things I just wanted to highlight here. The city's property tax at $3.0155 per thousand. And that we have several different revenue categories. Taxes include property taxes as well as local surcharge taxes. These license and permits, charges for service, intergovernmental fines and forfeitures, miscellaneous revenue, interfund transfers, and other financing sources. And so you'll see the primary revenue source of the city's general fund is property taxes. And we budget assuming that we will see approximately a 93% collection rate. We do have some accounts that are delinquent or some accounts that may be going through a BOPTA process or the property tax appeal process. And so we prefer to budget somewhat conservatively on some of these revenues, knowing that some of them may be tied up for a substantial period of time. Property taxes are a little more than 34% of the general fund. Turning to your next page here, which actually I'm going to deviate a little bit. On the dais there, we handed out 2 sheets for you to insert. One of them is franchise fees. And so here, just briefly, franchise fees are fees collected to entities that utilize the city right of way. These can include various internet service providers, the Dalles Disposal, North Wasco County PUD, as well as natural gas. You'll see that there's a pie chart included on this page to give you a sense of who the dominant franchise fee generator is, and then clearly tell Northern Wasco County PUD, dominant franchise fee provider, and you'll see a breakout on how those different fees are generated. Nearly all of them are a percentage of gross revenues. So PUD is at 3%, different cable televisions at 5%, telecommunications 7%, Northwest Natural Gas at 4.25%, and the Dalles Disposal at 3% of gross revenues. I'll pause for a moment at each one of these categories if there are any particular questions.
Matthew, before we move on, as I was looking through this process, there's a section on page 5 that the citizens don't have the opportunity of previewing this. And it outlines what citizens can expect from this process, this budget notification of meetings. These budget committee meetings encourage public comment and input. Verbal and written testimony can be submitted for the hearing, and you can review the budget document after being discussed at the hearing. Electronic copies are made available on the City of the Dalles website, and paper copies can be obtained for a small fee. I think that's very important for citizens to know about what the process is. And by the way, this is well laid out. It's very easy to understand. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you for highlighting that.
Back to you.
Moving on to page 10, we have a breakout of enterprise zone fees, specifically those that are generated by Design LLC. And this is actually the continuation of a budget issue paper I used to update every year when I was here at the city previously. And it breaks out what was formerly the 3 different agreements that we've had with the zone program, a 2005 agreement, a 2013 agreement, and a 2015 agreement. The 2003 agreement has ended, and so now moving forward, we just have the 2 agreements remaining. And so you'll see how those initial fees and annual fees are generated, how they've been used in years past. And then on page 12, kind of a summary of the funds that we expect to see in this budget and how some of those are allocated. On page 13, we have a section on transient room tax.
Excuse me, I had a question.
Please.
That's page 11. I just want to point out that the very last number at the very bottom of the page, 1,814,000, is we have not decided what to do with those monies. Is that correct?
Right, so that fee is an aggregate fee that is split between Wasco County and the city of Dalles as sponsors of the enterprise zone. And so those funds have been used for some commitments that we have already, namely the skill center that we have with CGCC. But these payments will continue to come in as the enterprise zone abatements continue. And so the enterprise zone is an enterprise zone agreement is a maximum of 15 years. Provides that tax abatement for 15 years. And as such, under these agreements, there'll be up to 15 years of payments. We're only partially.
Sure that it's half, which is
for page 13, transient room tax. In summary, we charge 8% tax, which has historically been broken out into 6% and 2%. As you can see on the next page, we've added a few different graphics to convey the increase and decrease of transient room tax revenue through the years, as well as how we have used some of those dollars to support various programs. I will say that on the bottom blue chart on page 14, there's a small error on the recommended funding amount for the Dalles Area Chamber of Commerce. That number is 439,630 instead of 426,702. There are also other uses of these funds or support that we provide to Fort Dalles Museum and Riverfront Trail Maintenance, which could be uses of TRT. As you'll see on page 15, it's historically been broken out where we provide a certain amount of TRT funding to North Wasco County Parks and Rec, and the remainder has been broken out into a pie chart into some benefit categories that we've come up with: tourism, youth, community, economic development, that's it, others. Get into a little bit more detail on some of these programs that we support in the city council's budget.
Before moving on, is 8% a common tax rate for revenue or transient? Okay, thank you.
And Matt, really, what was that number for the Chamber of Commerce again?
All right, it's 439,630. It is the correct number in the actual budget worksheet itself. Simply this
Okay.
graphic and chart is incorrect.
Thank you.
We had on page 16, we had a brief discussion about state shared revenues, which I will gloss over. And on page 17, we enter into our expenditure overview. And again, I'd like to turn it over to our finance director.
So the expenditures in each fund are broken out, and each department are broken out into personnel services, material services, capital outlay, capital projects, interfund transfers, debt service, and contingency. The personnel services, they include the wage and the benefits for the employee. This is, the health insurance, workers' comp, social security taxes, and other associated payroll costs. And the material and services includes just maintenance, repairs, office supplies, contractual services. Capital outlay is basically any threshold that is $5,000 or more. And then the capital projects are represented in the capital improvement plan program as you get down to page 49. And that is those capital project plan is really how we base what's in our capital project line items. The inter-fund transfers are budgeted transfers of resources from one fund to another. The fund making the transfer shows the amount transferred as a budget requirement. And then we have our debt service payments, which includes any repayments of any loans or other borrowings. And then we have our contingency. As Matthew mentioned earlier, we always try to reserve like a 10% contingency. And the contingency can be used to address items that occur during the year that cannot or not foreseen in the preparation of the budget. In order for the city to do a contingency, the council must pass a resolution to make sure the funds held in the contingency to the actual category where the expenditure is needed. Any questions?
One.
So again, on the subsequent pages here, we have tried to say some of this more detailed information to you. Sorry. A special thanks to Daniel Hunter, our Human Resource Director, for pulling together some of the information that you see under personnel and risk management. We've seen an increasing and somewhat concerning increase in our trend line for insurance premiums. And we've engaged with our new agent, Brianna Wimber, to kind of explore that and what that may mean going forward and potential ways that we can address that, as well as a more positive decreasing trend line when it comes to workers' comp claims. And so thank you to Daniel for pulling this together. On page, and I'll pause for a moment.
I have one.
Yes, Mayor.
The 13% average over 6 years increase in property insurance. Is that experience-based or is that something that all cities are getting?
I may defer to Daniel to answer that question, but my guess is that it's a increase that people are experiencing across the board.
Or cities?
They're experiencing across the board. CIS or City County Insurance Services is statewide risk pool for local government. So that's a trend that I would believe a lot of the different members are seeing. We share that pool or that risk pool with other entities. As Daniel noted in that paragraph, some other cities or communities may be hit hard by particular weather, flooding damages and whatnot. And so CIS, the insurance company, has to balance all those different needs.
The only thing I would add to that is for property insurance alone, not the other lines, but property insurance, Oregon requires reinsurance, which is, I think the budget document says national, it's actually international reinsurance companies. And so that's taking into account that the cost of insuring properties worldwide is what the reinsurance is. And that's the case if you have to do that. If there's more than 3 local governments joining in the pool in Oregon, has to go through reinsurance.
And on page 22, we have our FTE schedules with the trend lines over the last 5 years. Here a comparison in total FTE of 102 roughly in 2019 versus 112 in 2024. And interesting metric to maybe evaluate that by is also included here as FTEs per 1,000 population. On page 26 is our general fund summary. And just as a review in some of the formatting changes like we talked about previously, we have fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 21-22 actuals on the left-hand side of that column. with fiscal year 22-23 budget, which includes the amendments or changes that were made throughout that fiscal year. And then the proposed budget that we're reviewing tonight, fiscal year 23-24. And so a couple of things that I wanted to highlight there, under revenue for each department. You'll see revenues at 10.7 million, which is mainly property tax. Some of the difference there in that amount is due to transfers to the capital fund, like I mentioned in the budget message. Transfer to the Columbia Gorge Regional Airport for their operating expenses and the support that we provide them, as well as $350,000 at match money for an EDA grant that we received in years past, as well as that street fund transfer. You don't see down below transfers out 3.859. And part of that transfer is the capital project fund. And then on page 27, again, we have some of that detail on council supported items, similar to what you saw on the TRT chart. It's not a duplication of that chart, but more specificity on what city council has conveyed their support. Angie, would you like to talk about general fund contingency?
So the adopted city council policy is to maintain a 10% general fund contingency. The contingency for this year is proposed to be 1,062,247, which meets our 10% policy. This is calculated by taking the total operating budgets of departments, transfer outs, and removing the cost of a possible rare support. Our unappropriated ending fund balance is basically after we have our revenues, we do our expenditures, we do our contingency, the remaining portion goes into the unappropriated ending fund balance. And we try to leave enough, put enough money in that unappropriated ending fund balance to get us through from July through November until our property tax revenue comes in and our other sources of revenue come in to pay the personnel services, material services, and other items like that.
If I can draw your attention now to page 33, total appropriation summary.
It's a question about
Yes, you may. Chair recognizes Mayor Mays.
27. You have 25,000 for the fireworks. Refresh my memory. Wasn't there an issue last year? Fireworks that,
So one of the challenges with Fort Dalles 4th fireworks funding is that the 4th of July is obviously the 4th of July.
that's
3 days after
yeah.
budget, our fiscal year. So last year, we in essence, I guess you could say we double funded it. Not really, but we pre-funded one of the fireworks shows to get them on the correct schedule, if you will. And so in this year's budget, not the upcoming year, in this fiscal year's budget, we have $25,000 for the July 4th, 2023 fireworks. In this upcoming budget, we'll be funding the July 4th, 2024 fireworks. And that way it helps with when the contract has to be signed and when the funds are actually paid.
I have one additional question. I was looking at the FTE schedules, and under judicial, it has from 2019, 2022, and then it goes down 2021 to 0.75. I assume that is the municipal judge moving to the county. Is that correct?
No, actually, back in the earlier stages, we were actually operating court full time, and we had a full time
Correct.
judicial person in court clerk that was in that position. So that position moved down to basically a quarter FTE, and the judge dropped his time down also. So that's where we're seeing the difference.
I understand. I was looking for it in the position details and I didn't see it over there. That's why I asked. Okay. Thank you. Moving on.
Just so you're aware, it is now under the finance, utility, and judicial.
Oh,
So it is on the about 4 items down halfway in between the page.
on page. Got it. I see it.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
If I can direct your attention to page 30. Summary of all funds. And what I wanted to highlight here is to my notes. The total budget that we have before us this evening, which is approximately 91.65 million. This is broken down into each of the funds that you see here on the summary page, with public works being the largest, followed by the general fund. And we'll get again into detail on each of these specific funds as we work through each department's presentations. But this is a good page to reference as that overall summary. And then on to page 41. The general fund administrative transfers. Again, we touched upon this briefly. These are transfers for services provided by 7 of the general funds, including city council, city manager, clerk, city attorney, finance, IT, and HR. A couple changes here, a couple updates for the budget committee is that this will actually be the first year that we have an interfund transfer from the airport. This is the result of some dialogue that we had with Klickitat County. And so at the airport, we have a joint management agreement there where we share in the cost of providing services. And so in years past, the city has provided substantial in-kind services to the airport as a supportive partner. And Klickitat County will help share in those costs now going forward, which will take the shape of an administrative transfer. I've been working with Klickitat County Commission over the past several months discussing this concept and how we apply it, and have received their support for that. We're also engaged with the library district and the library board and their discussion of our discussion of the administrative transfers that we charge the library, as well as a general review of the IGA that we have with the library district to reach a better agreement or to address some of the issues that we've been having over the years. We've employed that IGA as it was created back in 2010. Timely for an update. So here in this general fund section, you'll see how that's broken out. On page 44, there's again a summary page for you. And then supplemental documents detailing the methodology on how we calculate each of those transfers. And would you like to speak more to that?
I think one of the important things on the transfer of methodology to remember is, for example, the utility billing. The utility billing does not get charged to, for example, the library. The utility billing is for the wastewater and the water fund. That's where those services are provided, and they pay for those transfers. Also, we have a inspector's codes position that is actually going to be shared with the general fund in the planning department this year. And you'll see that in red, a third of the way down on the page, that we're actually reducing the street, the water, and the wastewater fund for that, because they are providing the personnel services, they're paying for that. And so we're reducing their transfer to cover our portion of the cost for that. So I think that those are a couple of things to just be able to understand. And then also it goes the opposite way for the safety officer. So the safety officer is a position that's funded in the general fund in the human resources department. And so the street fund and the water and the wastewater, they pay a certain portion of that personnel service that's included in the transfer. Does anyone have any questions regarding that? Okay.
The next section that we have is the capital improvement plan on page 49 that I just wanted to briefly highlight for you. This is where a lot of the detailed information for each of the department's capital improvement plan is summarized for you. So I just call that out. It's a reference point in the document to understand what some of the future trends or what some of the future upcoming expenses may be for each of the departments that we have here. Oh, thank you. And there is also included on your dais was an additional page City of the Dalles, Oregon, budget 2023 and refund transfers. You want to speak to this?
Actually, that should have been 23, 24.
Yeah, thank you.
It's the interfund transfer. So for budget law, our transfers have to balance. And so these are how we track our transfers. It shows the transfers in and the transfers out. If you look on the first line, it shows the general fund transferring 750,000 out, transferring 13,834 to the unemployment capital projects fund. So if you are looking at on the other uses, when we get to the end of those transfers out, this is where you can see that breakdown, it could be helpful for you, but that's going to be your new page 67.
67. All right.
Budget lane.
Let me just give a little information on that.
57.
57.
60,
67
I-
is just a title page.
right before 60.
Before 60.
Yeah, that'll be the new
page.
67. Yeah.
And so again, to summarize, we've had some structure changes and updates to the budget book. We've restructured in years past, what has been a general budget message. Incorporated the budget message in the budget overview, which we've kind of broken it out. The budget message review and these sections of what we just is a good reference point, a good summary point for capital improvement plan expenditures, where certain revenues come from, what category of expenditure that may be. And that serves as a good starting point as an overview of the budget. And before I turn it over to Jeff, our airport manager, who will talk about the airport budget, Angie just wants to, and has a question perhaps, Angie will give a brief orientation.
Chair recognizes Counselor Richardson.
Thank you. Tell me what's new with the CIP this year.
I would frankly say besides the formatting and color scheme changes.
Yeah.
The city departments that we've had here have maintained CIP schedules for a number of years. It's one of our item policies to have a 5-year CIP for equipment and projects that we may have. One thing I could highlight is that with the hiring of the facility supervisor position, I expect to see a more robust CIP for city facilities. For example, we have an elevator here at City Hall, and we have a roof over at the police department, and they're all going to need to be planned for and budgeted and maintained. Spirit of your question, or did I miss the mark?
It was the lovely new formatting is noted, but thank you. I was specifically looking at the numbers and the substance and the history of the thing. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I have one more. It's not a question, but a comment that interfund transfers. These transfers are under council oversight as we move through this so that there is oversight on any of the transfers. I think that's within the state law. Correct.
Correct. But as we go through the budget process this evening, we will be approving those transfers. Those transfers are used to fund other sources of other funds. And
I understand. The point I was trying to make was that all of those transfers are under supervision of the city council.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Correct. Once we have an approved budget though, and the fiscal year has begun, those transfers will in place. It's not an item that we will bring back to city council for approval. As for example.
I just wanted to make that aware for the public that's tuning in tonight. All right. Thank you.
So if you can turn to page 68, I'll hand it over to our finance director, and then we'll
16.
format.
Yeah. Actually, if you want to just go ahead and turn to the first page of the airport, since we're going there this evening first, you can turn to page 217. This evening, as we go through the proposed budget, we'll be working off the budget worksheets, and the budget worksheets give the more detailed information, and I feel like they're more helpful. So the detailed information is in the blue, and that gives a breakdown and And if you add those up, that would be the total to the black number. And this year, all of your actuals for 2020, 21 and 2021-22 are on the left side of the page. And our budget that we're actively in currently right now is 22-23, and that is the budget. That does have our budget resolutions to date. So we're current with that. So any budget resolutions that have been approved through the year, those numbers have been updated. As Jeff will go through his budget, he'll try to highlight on some of the aspects of, some changes from the previous years to the current year. And I think you can take it from here, Jeff.
Yes. You might check to make sure it's turned on.
Hello.
Yep. Good to go.
I'm Jeff Bernard, the airport manager. Matthew's done a pretty good job of making sure that I believe covering the history of the airport and the joint operating agreement between Clickitat County and the city of the Dalles. That actually came into effect back in 2002. And if there's more clarification, I'll just gloss over some of that. But if somebody has a question about it, please ask. Probably the most notable thing going into this budget cycle for the airport is on the budget issue paper that you have, calls out the number of grants that we've gone after and successfully, most all of them have, pardon me. We're well on our way to having all of these grants in place for about $4 million worth of improvement at our airport.
And for easy reference, the budget issue paper is page 262.
What?
262.
260.
I wrote that down and forgot to say that, sorry. Are there any questions in regards to the grants that are on that budget issue?
A really quick question. I assume the increase from last year to at a little over 4 million to 8.5 was because of the hangar situation and things, if I remember right.
The increase is adding about $4 million worth of grant funding to our budget there. Yes. Part of that is a paving project that we just opened our bids on last Friday, which is about a $3.1 million project. And we've got 4 other projects, a fuel tank or fuel apron and decommissioning of the in-ground fuel farm we currently have there. Went after a FEMA and Oregon Emergency Management grant to decommission our existing fuel tanks out of the ground. Simultaneously going after the CORE grant, which is a Critical Oregon Airport Relief Fund that the state of Oregon has for doing stuff like this. The airport was successful in getting 2 of the 3 $250,000 grants for these projects. We have a on decommissioning of on completion of the fuel apron. We have the funds available to add a new self-serve above ground state-of-the-art fuel system to the airport while we decommission the in-ground system that FEMA and OEM have as a higher priority due to the Cascadia worrying about that. Getting fuel tanks out of the ground is a high priority list. Tried to time everything to where there was a huge cost savings in these grants with having equipment already there and only one mobilization for the equipment. A lot on the plate this year, but seems to be working the way it should.
If I may add, yeah.
Please.
The EDA grant that I spoke of earlier has been received, and it was received by Clickitat County. And so those funds are over in Clickitat County. You won't see that EDA funds in this budget. But it's part of the transfer of $350,000, which is our share of the match required for that EDA grant. Clickitat County will also contribute $350,000 for that EDA grant. Now, for the hangar and utility project that grant, EDA grant is supporting, there's still a gap in the total cost there. So you will see in this budget a CDS allocation under federal grants. CDS stands for Congressionally Directed Spending. So that is a request, City of the Dalles, Jeff, myself, Nubia and Izetta and a few others. We worked in partnership with Clickitat County and CGCC to submit that CDS request to Merkley's office. And so we're hopeful that we will receive the necessary funding to fill the gap for that project through that source. We're also exploring a few other potential avenues, but I think that's our real hope right now.
So what will those funds, how will they be used and how will the airport improve because of those funds?
So the CDS funds will be used in conjunction with the EDA monies and match from the City of the Dalles and Clickitat County. Build the training maintenance hangar for CGCC,
Got it.
as well as extending utilities to that hangar, which will also allow us to stub in utilities to several other business park lots on the way to that.
So on the rehabilitation of South Apron, what is the net gain from having that grant? How did it improve the airport?
On the South
Yeah.
Apron portion of that grant is deteriorating blacktop. It's reached its useful life. The FAA puts a 20-year life on blacktop. That's what, anytime we go out after a grant, they're asking if our project will last 20 years. Dallas has such a mild climate that most of our pavement is in the 40-year category now. We have a lot of pavement that needs to be replaced, but between the state of Oregon and the state of Washington and the feds, they come out, the FAA, they come out every year to 2 years and do a PMI similar to street department and do a pavement evaluation. And our South Apron is eligible. It's a tier 3 project. They have different levels of projects. If there's a safety issue, if there's a runway that needs to be replaced, it's going to rank way higher than apron. Our apron is eligible for that funding, so we're doing that repair. All of the FAA grants have a 10% match, which the core grants that I went after with the state of Oregon cover 90% of that 10%. We get our portion of it down dramatically. The other portion of that South Apron grant, which is the taxi lanes, that was an additive to the revenue generating project that we came up with to add 5 new taxi lanes, to add additional T hangars. That's really the big source of revenue for the airport to try to make it self-sufficient is hangar rentals. We can get these five taxi lanes built. We will have the opportunity to put up. Each building brings in about $40,000 a year in revenue. Have shovel-ready sites that the airport can build on, or we could expand or put the opportunity out there for private development to build a hangar as well on those sites. But it's been very cost prohibitive to build at the airport due to the cost of the blacktop, putting that infrastructure in. This grant will take care of one of the major expenses, and now it's just a matter of getting the buildings up. Because at the end of the taxi lane portion of the project, they will actually be the grade between the taxi lanes will be set right bigger foundation for revenue generating.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Right.
Moving over to the budget worksheet, beginning fund balance is at 790,000, about 70,000 higher than the previous year. you know, I'll just touch on the highlights, and if there's questions beyond that, Matthew did touch on the grants, and they're broke out between federal grants and got the bill grants, the bipartisan infrastructure grant is what we're actually using to build the fuel apron or simultaneously with the south apron and taxi lane. Or then working down through there, each of the core grants from the state of Oregon basically are the backstop or the match money to each of the federal grants that we have, whereas covering 90% of the 10% match from the feds require. Pretty much leveraged. We've got about $4 million worth of investment at the airport with everything goes off as hearing to, we'll have a 4% investment on that $4 million. But that number came way down from 10%. Hopeful win.
I think it's important to highlight the fact that these core grants are from the state board. So it reflects kind of the interesting benefit and sometimes challenge can be avoided regional airport as by being an Oregon airport located in Washington. So compliments to Jeff for securing those different core grants. Recently completed a site visit and tour with Business Oregon as well. Different department, obviously, from core. So we're hoping to build those ties and strengthen those relationships, funding opportunities, sources of assistance on both Oregon and Washington.
I'll be in Spokane next week with Washington on the plan for maybe how we come up with funds to actually build the building. Best money for the taxpayers is that the airport would own the building, the hangars. Figure out how to come up with those funds and do that. It's that much closer to being a self-sufficient airport. My personal goal is 24 months. We'll make it self-sufficient. Moving through the grants. Part of our process this year has been stabilizing and just trying to get a uniform rent rate throughout the airport with consistent hangar lease rates and land lease rates and whatnot. These are all items that have come for council. Well, many members haven't heard that. That's we're going to see a little bit of increased revenue based on that. And some stabilization of rents, and then adding a 2.6% annual increase to our budget. Each lease on the airport will have a July 1, 2.6% increase. Their lease rates slowly catch us back up to where we should. Not having to 8.9 that right now.
How was that received by the leasee?
Fair. I mean, nobody wants to ever see their rent go up, but pretty easy argument when you can hand them the current CPI and 9% to 2.6 that we took a rolling average of 5 years and came up with 2.6% average for that rolling 5 years, which helps everybody, I believe. And it'll slowly catch us up without being a real burden to tenants. Yeah, I think anytime you raise somebody's rent, they grumble.
But it's fair.
I believe it's very fair. Probably more fair to the tenant than it is to the airport, because there's a lot of airports that are making the bump.
Thank you.
We also changed our fuel flowage rate, which is a fee that the FBO, Hood Aero, pays to the airport. Every gallon of fuel that's sold on the property, whether it be from a fire helicopter, a lot of the helicopter companies and whatnot that come in to fight fire throughout the season, they bring their own fuel trucks in. They have fuel contracts. We as an airport don't ever receive any revenue from them pulling up to our pumps and buying fuel. Part of that policy is we charge 10% a gallon or 10 cents a gallon for every gallon flowed. If they check in at the airport for the fire season, you take a meter reading off their truck. They check out at the end and it's your credit card. Some of it's billed through the Oregon Department of Forestry, some of it's billed through the feds. Presently, we have 3 different land use agreements in place with fire agencies that are returning customers every year. Tack Arrow or Hood Arrow now is also moved from, they were at a tiered fuel flowage rate of 5, 6, and 7 cents. This year, the renegotiation of their contract, it's gone to just a flat 10 cents a gallon. Builds us a decent reserve to be able to take care of maintenance, upgrade stuff. I have a reserve in place for that fuel farm if something should. Down here to my lease revenues and property rentals, there's kind of a dramatic change between the 23-24 budget and what's showing up in the previous year. That is a redistribution of where the rents are being charged. Now property rentals are now being credited to the lease revenue due to the GASB 87 changes. There is questions about that. We have a wonderful finance director that takes care of that. Going on down the line. 350,000 with the EDA grant that Matthew has spoke to. And we have a fire flow line being engineered right now. That's a $30,000 line down under engineering services. That is for putting a fire hydrant line through the business or through the existing terminal area at the airport. There is not fire suppression of adequate size through that terminal area of the airport. That's something that between Dalles Fort Water District and ourselves, we've kind of come to an agreement that that's got to get done so that we're adequately protected.
Well, if I could ask a question?
Yeah.
Why is the auditing service so much more? Why is the water and sewer so much more than the actual? All I see is the actual for 21-22. The budget for 22-23 is closer, and garbage from 21 to $250. They just seem like they're huge changes.
I'm not even seeing it.
217.
On page 217 at the bottom. And after contractual services. Or included in contractual services, I guess.
Auditing services I don't have a definitive answer other than that was the invoice received. The price of the auditing for our budget audit.
Yeah, it's our ACFR. So every year we have a audited financial statements. And depending on if we need to have a single audit, the audit may be more also, but it goes up with CPI on an annual basis, depending on who our auditor is. And this was the budgeted, or this was the contracted amount in 20 and 22 and 23. And this was the 23-24 as an estimate because during the time we were looking for an auditor and we were currently still have not signed a contract with a new auditor yet.
It just seemed like a huge jump from 5,000 to 9,000.
It's unfortunate, but we are kind of, you have our hands tied and we're stuck on what, trying to find a really good auditor.
And water and sewer went way up, and garbage service. I just thought that was kind of an odd little thing.
So I look at the garbage services and I'm not sure exactly what is over at the airport for garbage, but there is also items that they do when they're disposing and disposal fees. And again, it's a budgeted amount that at the time of what they think they might be budgeting for, So I think 250 is a conservative number for a whole year of garbage fees.
Okay, but it was actually only $21.
Yeah, the previous, as we've worked through some of these FBO agreements with different management companies at the airport. Previously, and even now, there is the FBO actually pays for the garbage service. But as I've been in this position, I've had to clean out 2 different hangars where people have vacated,
Okay,
and it's a dump load. I'll take my dump trailer and all garbage to the landfill.
just,
That we did budget for it. Most likely it'll be there end of the year, but it's definitely one of those things that I foresee. We've got hangar remodels and a roof to be replaced on the Blue Quonset building. We'll have to haul off the roofing off of that building.
okay, thanks.
The water issue is Dallesport Water District, in one of these previous agreements, gone way back to 2010, I believe, is when the water agreement was put in place. There was a meter put in that did not necessarily track the low flow gallons, and the airport has never been charged for the gallonage used at the airport. It's always just been a flat $400 a month. And Dallesport Water District has since changed their policies. Now we get charged the $400 a month and additional, I believe it's $6.25 per 1,000 gallons now. Probably won't be watering the grass this year. That dramatically changed my water budget.
Thanks.
Welcome. Moving over to the next page, part of in that same line of the garbage disposal, I've got on the back here the hangar door repair and upgrade. Some of that is, we've got one of the old Otis building is in desperate need of repair, so I'm building new hangar doors for that this year. Have that as a budget, a $25,000 budget item in our plans for the year. That will create a fair amount of stuff to be hauled through the dumpster. Anything else is pretty similar on down through the list, and so if somebody has something that thought that you question about.
Other questions? Seeing no questions, thank you.
I'd actually like to just comment on a couple of items on the proposed budget worksheet. As mentioned earlier, we do have lease interfund transfers now with the airport and with Clickitat County. These were 2 items. This was an item that was not in the budget. The budget was already completed when this was approved through Clickitat County. So on the intergovernmental revenue that it currently says 65,000, that will increase. And the that'll increase 19,230. And then the general fund transfers will actually reduce $45,077. It's reducing because the airport's supposed to have a transfer to us now for the transfer of methodology. So we'll be reducing our transfer over, which is the same thing. So that's going to be an adjustment of $25,847,000, which will be coming out of the ending fund balance. So the new ending fund balance will be $262,461. Does anyone have any questions regarding that?
I see none. Shall we move on? Pardon?
Police Department.
Okay,
You need to start out with your general fund.
that was on my list, but
Now, sorry, my apologies, yeah. Want to give the orientation?
So Matthew, we'll do airport, then police, then general fund.
Yes, we've just completed the airport.
Got it?
We're looking at general fund revenues on page 68.
So again, we'll be working off the budget worksheets this evening. So you'll look at page 69 of the budget. At the very beginning is the beginning fund balance. When we are putting the budget together, it's early on in the year. So again, we're trying to go by what we estimate to receive in revenue and what we estimate to spend in expenditures. That's what gives us our ending fund balance for this current year, which gives us our beginning fund balance for the 23-24 year. So we're estimating that our beginning fund balance will be $6,921,008. Want to go ahead?
And so simply working through the list here on general fund revenues, you'll see the revenues of property taxes. We have our transient room tax, and as well as various franchise agreements that we have. I'll note about 3/4 of the way down through the page, you'll see the PUD intergovernmental franchise fee, which has, looking in years past, certainly see an increase in trend line there. We have our state shared revenue, marijuana tax, for example. And then on page 70, you'll see enterprise zone payments from the 2013 agreement, as well as those transfers that we spoke about previously.
Yeah, Matthew, may I? I think one important factor to bring up as we're going in the revenue is on the bottom of page 69, under other miscellaneous revenues, we're estimating this year at a new revenue source of $50,000 for reimbursement for the officer buyout program. And I think as Tom gets into the budget, he can explain that in that expenditure piece. But I just wanted to point out where that revenue source is on the general fund budget. And then on the state shared revenues, and as you see in the blue, the methodology, this comes from the League of Oregon Cities, and it's based off of the population.
Are there any questions?
I just got to ask about the marijuana tax. Is that split up? Is that divvied up at the state level to various municipalities, or is that collected locally?
That is both. That's the local and the state portion that are in the line item. Is that the question that you're asking?
Yeah. Thanks.
As you know, by the with the our marijuana taxes have decreased quite a bit due to the Measure 110 that came in play last year. So those you'll see that those are actually we're estimating to receive a little bit more. But if you looked in the actual of the 2021, you'll see that it has diminished quite a bit due to the Measure 110.
Just curious, what is the employee wellness revenue? What is the source? How do we get that money?
Those funds come in from our health insurance provider. And it's a health incentive that then goes to the employee to offset the cost of premiums paid by the employee. And so you'll also see an expenditure in the HR budget for that program. So this is money coming in that's basically it's
Just
a pass through from HR through this line.
Understood. Thank you.
I think the other piece I would like to highlight here is that we do still have a line item where we receive dock fees, ships that are docking at our cruise ship terminal. And with the recent lease that we approved, there'll be some changes. That was with American Cruise Lines. Maybe stealing some of Angie's thunder here in terms of proposed budget changes. But we recently entered into a lease with American Cruise Lines where they will pay a flat fee per year, $65,000. And the dock fees that they collect from sub dockings, or tenant arranged vessel dockings, I should say, would go to American Cruise Line. So we won't manage that dock schedule directly anymore. We won't be collecting those fees, American Cruise. And so that'll result in a reduction of 13,500.
In the miscellaneous sales and income, because historically, all the dock bookings went into that line item. So those that revenue will not be in there, but there'll be the addition, there'll be a boat lease for 65,000.
And finally, I'd like to add associated with that lease agreement as well, that American Cruise Lines will be paying for the water service that they have at the dock. And so we'll take that into account.
Chair recognizes Mayor Mays.
Yes, the biggest revenue is, the franchise fee from the PED. I noticed it's up 51% over what was budgeted last year. So I was wondering, what you're projecting for the rest of this year that would warrant such a.
Currently, it is a little bit above, but we only had, when we were doing the budget, we get them in the quarterly payment. So, I have not received that quarterly payment yet. It'll probably come in at any time. And then I'll have like 3 quarters and I'll be able to give more of an estimate.
It is indeed an increase.
Okay.
We're not complaining.
I think since we're doing the revenues right now, on the financial services, when we did put the budget together, we estimated that we would be receiving Wasco County Parks and Recreation revenue. We will now no longer be receiving that. So we'll be reducing that line item 15,000. So the new line item number will be 35,000.
Out of curiosity, Angie, what's the interest revenues?
The interest revenues is, we actually put our money into our LGIP account. And it's the local government interest pool account. And although it's not a huge high interest rate, it is up pretty high right now. And that's what we anticipate that we'll have in revenue for interest revenue at that time.
All right, shall we move on?
Yes, we shall.
Worthy,
Chairman McLaughlin.
yes.
Of the Budget Committee, thank you for this opportunity to present to you the Police Department, Codes Enforcement and Dog Control budget for fiscal year 23-24. It's my pleasure to present to you today. And first acknowledgements to Finance Director Wilson, City Manager Cleaves, and Captain Carrico for the assistance in constructing this budget. This is a balanced budget request. It is through the general fund, and it definitely aligns with the City Council goal setting session that was held in the winter. This has been under construction since January. And a couple of things that it is not aspirational or bloated. It's not overstuffed with pork in any way. It meets the needs of the police department, and which is ultimately the needs of the city as a whole. So to speak to the budget of the police department, I think it's important to first review the mission of the police department. The mission of the police department is to protect protection of persons and their property, in order to maintain and promote the safety of the public and the livability of the Dalles through community policing and partnerships. This budget purchases people and equipment and training and other items to support their endeavors to keep the community safe. Police department consists of 1 chief, 1 captain, 6 sergeants, 17 police officers, administrative support position, department support position, and 1 part-time evidence technician. Absolutely essential in the operations of our department. Another page that I call your attention to is page 54, which is the police department capital improvement plan, where some of the larger items are listed, and we come back to that in just a moment. As I go forward in the budget, I look at the accomplishments in 2023, which the police department's been highly successful in solving violent crime within the Dalles, including a homicide and a couple of shootings. That's all indicative of having the correct funding, training, personnel, and equipment to do our jobs. So we're proud of what we've accomplished here to keep the community safe this year. And in the next 5 to 10 years, just glancing through the budget narrative, There are a few things that are looming out in the future that we just don't know now, which is the implementation of ballot measure 114, which is a permit to purchase firearms permit in the state. That has never been a function of city police in the past. That has always been a function, similar functions of the sheriff's department. So that may be something that we see coming back future budgets or later down the road for support to do that. We also, as a department, don't participate in Oregon sex offender registration program. That burden, weight, and effort has always been carried by the Oregon State Police here. They're looking for support as well. Another issue down the road to think about. We know and acknowledge that a police officer needs a car. And if you look on page 114, our police department vehicle fleet plan is listed here. And we're going to ask for some money to replace some patrol cars. So it's fair to address this as a standing large item. Our police department has a fleet of 21 vehicles and 1 utility trailer. Definitely not all marked cars. Most of them are not. We have 8 marked patrol cars, 8 unmarked patrol vehicles, not patrol vehicles, administrative vehicles, like for instance, mine, the captain's, evidence technician, detectives, and so on and so forth. The table that you see inserted in the document on page 115 lists every vehicle that we have, and it shows their age and what they are in their general purpose use. So we know that going forward, we generally purchase 2 vehicles, 2 patrol vehicles, which are heaviest duty use vehicles every year, and an unmarked vehicle to replace either a detective car or administration car or something like that. So this year we've accomplished that. We finally got 2 Dodge Chargers delivered and 1 unmarked vehicle for detective use. So those are in. However, we do believe that Dodge is going to quit making Chargers. And so we're going to have a strategic shift in direction, what we're driving for cars. This year, outgoing, we need to purchase 2 vehicles, and 2 marked and 2 unmarked vehicles. Our marked patrol vehicles will transition to the marked Ford Explorer police package. That's the SUVs that you might see around town. Those come at a cost of $46,937 each, plus police equipment, specialized police equipment to be installed, and graphics. So for marked cars in the upcoming year, we're looking for $135,875.51. And in unmarked cars, we have a strategic planning switch there as well. Rather than buying just whatever kind of car for detectives, we want to also move those into unmarked Ford Explorer cars to add resiliency to the department and also add driver familiarity as people transition between one assignment and another, or grab a car for duty use that they're familiar with how it operates, and that'll reduce our risk ever so slightly, but every little bit counts. And then in the event that a marked patrol car suffers catastrophic loss, such as a fire, a flood, or just a massive breakdown, which we have experienced, one of those unmarked cars could then be promoted quickly to a marked patrol car just by putting on lights and graphics. And so we think that that is a good strategy going forward. And of course, we will always need to have other unmarked cars that are much lower profile. And we'll deal with that in coming budgets. But the budget request for unmarked cars is $227,926. On to page 120 is the budget worksheet. And I highlighted a few things that I thought might be of interest. Most of this is carry forwards from last year, and a few items that were new or different. Page 120, contractual services, accreditation yearly service fee of $3,000. That's a fee paid to Oregon Accreditation Alliance to maintain department's accredited status, which is absolutely critical for us to stay current in our operations and modern in how we police the city. That'll be an ongoing running expense as we go forward. And then a little lower, if you go under software maintenance, administration, investigation management, annual reporting tool is only 1,500. But I highlighted that as a critical tool for the police department because it manages our risk internally. It's where we document our police car chases, uses of force, discipline, commendations, And I would propose that without that tool, we would have been at a very difficult time becoming accredited. So that's also a piece of software that is at end of life and will need to be changed out in forthcoming budgets, and that price is very likely to. But for the moment, we've kept it alive at $50. And then moving forward to page 121. There is a line, second blue line down, it says replace broken front office window, $1,800. For the security of our front office staff, our front desk is glassed in, and one of those large panes of high durability glass has failed and cracked, and it needs to be replaced. Safety issue. That should be hopefully a one-time expense. And then right below that is garage door repair for $4,000. And I can tell you, we're in and out and in and out all the time, and we're continually breaking springs. So we have a stock of those available to us. We're never going to get away from that. I'm told that we have the strongest garage door springs available to man. They can break. So there's that. And then I look down to travel, food, and lodging, which is largely a training expenses. We travel for conferences and we travel for training. And that section has been blown out to additional detail from last year. So you can see the sort of training plan going forward for homicide conferences or Oregon Association of Chiefs of Police, International Association of Chiefs of Police, the ongoing professional development that our officers need to do their job. And we took a look back at some of our calls for service from May to May, just to sort of support this training budget line, because we recognize it's expensive. Police are expensive to get trained. And that training requirement seems to keep going up every year. There's more and more and more added on, largely through legislative process at the state. From May to May, we responded to 2,328 calls for service and only used force in the city 46 times, which equates to 0.0021% of the time using force. And that's a credit to the equipment and the training that our officers have. So in my estimation, it's a good investment to continue to expand upon and provide that training line for the officers.
What's the number of calls?
2,300. 23,000. I'm sorry, 23,000. Say it again. Okay.
23,000, not 2,328. 23,000?
Wrote it down.
21,328. Wow. But only 46.
21,328.
21,328, but only 46
That's right.
used force.
Sorry
So,
for the confusion. That's it.
so picky me. There's a lot of meals and lodging, and they don't seem consistent. $325 a night. Where are these trainings taking place? And the meals, some of them are really a lot, and then others are not so much. It just seems kind of strange. And I'm sure that you've got that all.
Sometimes they're included with the training. In terms of conferences, they may come with a lunch or a dinner. And then oftentimes those trainings are held in locations like San Diego or even Orlando. There's sort of a
flights.
schedule that goes through. So flights and
Yeah.
well included. Yeah.
Okay, just, $325 a night. I don't live that way, I guess.
And that's
It's
no,
kind of
and-
like
and
startling to me.
nor do we generally, but we have to pay what the market rate is, and that'll also depend on how many people are going. And we do a great job of sharing rooms, and we bargain shop when we stay places. So it's not lost on us either that that's a large number. And then on the bottom, page 122, we have $1,000 for Narcan, which is an anti-opioid medication, and it's in my experience since I've been here in the Dalles that we really can't operate without that anymore. We have to have it with us because our officers are out there saving lives every month. Doses. I wanted to highlight that as an example of what the money's buying for the police department, not for our benefit, but for the benefit of the city. And moving forward to page 123, Angie mentioned earlier, there is a miscellaneous expense, reimbursement expense for officer buyout, 50,000. We have multiple officers on our department whose tenure is less than 3 years. Oregon law allows us, if one of those officer transfers to another Oregon agency, to bill them for the training that it costs us to bring that person up to proficiency in police work. We know that we're going to have at least one or two, maybe more officers transferring out to other agencies and assignments and new adventures for them. And if that's the case, we'll bill out those expenses as it's permissible under the law. So that would be a revenue coming in back to the police department. Ideally. Continuing down, assets under $5,000, we do have a need and a plan to replace our service handguns. We have an officer on the department who's been here about 8 years or so, 7 or 8 years, and he's carried the same gun the whole time. They're shot 3 times a year and hundreds of rounds each time, and they just flat wear out. Springs begin to break and deteriorate, and there's small moving parts and pins and rails where it's metal to metal rubbing, and just behooves us to replace those guns. That's a distinct safety issue. So for $28,415, $25,814, I'm going to make that mistake again, we do plan to do a life cycle replacement for all of our service handguns, make a transition from 40 caliber to 9mm. A 9mm is a more readily available round, and then improvements in ballistics, manufacturing, and bullet design have made them virtually equal in their capacities for use on the street. So we're going to go to the more commonly used 9mm. We do have slightly below that. It says handheld radar replacement, $1,000 each for $3,000. Our radars are ready to enter the police museum. They're that old and they need to be replaced. So that line item is important for that. And then tactical rifle sling and optics for $14,000, moving that forward from last year to the capital outlay. If you look at the bottom, equipment other, CJIS secure encrypted line to Wasco County. We had a criminal justice information services division audit this year from the Oregon State Police. Their technical auditor came out and identified a shortcoming in our technical infrastructure. A power line up to the sheriff's department was unencrypted because its past line of sight is required to be encrypted. So that should be essentially a one-time fee to buy a networking device to encrypt that. Questions?
Records management. I know that there have been additional requirements for your department to maintain adequate records. How are you filling that gap?
Our records management is listed here as a software. That's Justice is what that's called. Our current records management system is very, very antiquated, and it looks like very old computer game or something like that. It needs to be updated and refreshed, and we've entered a project with Wasco County Sheriff's Department and a few other stakeholders, including Mid-Columbia Fire and Rescue, to explore the market and find out what that's going to look like as a project. However, that system records management is closely tied to computer-aided dispatch. Those two core systems work very closely together. And because it's such a foundational change to make that switch, the idea is to increment that process and first approach CAD and then come with RMS in subsequent years. So we're probably at least 18 months out on a CAD and probably that again on a records management system afterwards. It's a large amount of organizational change management to implement those new systems. It's training, it's setup, it's procurement. There's just a lot to it. So that's forthcoming, and most of the CAD project is going to be consumed within existing 911 budget expenses, we hope. And there are offsets because it replaces an old system that we're currently paying for now. But yes, we do have a technology deficit in the gorge, and that is being actively worked on. As we approach the end of our accreditation cycle, which is taking a lot of Jamie and I's time, we have our assessment on May 10th, and we'll be formally accredited by the board in September. And then we can turn a lot more effort and time towards those technology projects that you're speaking.
Thank you. Other questions? Hearing none, would you like to continue or are you completed?
I will continue, but we'll clear our heads of that, start thinking about codes enforcement. Codes enforcement is essentially a program within the police department, but the budget is reduced separately. Codes enforcement consists of one person assigned to our office. She is supervised with our administrative sergeant, who also assists with all that budgeting and oversight of that position. The mission of the codes enforcement program is to enhance the image and livability of the community through compliance with the city's ordinances, particularly addressing nuisance property maintenance and abatement efforts. By abatement, that means cleaning it up. And abatement can come in two forms. It can be a voluntary abatement where the process is initiated and the homeowner or property owner says, you know what, you're right, I'll clean it up, and they do. And if they do not do that, or they just don't have the interest or ability to do that, the city can come in and cause that action to happen, and then place a lien on the property and hopefully recoup those funds upon transfer of the property down the road. I wanted to point out the accomplishments in 2023. I'm looking at the top of page 125 for codes enforcement. And now, mind you, this is just one person. They opened 396 complaint-driven cases for investigation. There are two ways that cases are opened within codes. There's complaints, and then there's proactive activity on the part of the codes enforcement officer. She sees something, if an officer sees something and reports to her, it's not really a complaint from the community. That's something that we initiated. 396 complaint-driven cases, scrapped 247 cars within the city. That's cars that are sitting on lawns, cars that are sitting on blocks, just junk that are out there. And I'll point out that that was done at no cost to the city because the codes enforcement officer figured out a way to make the scrap metal worth something and worth the time of the person that hauls it off and gets rid of it. Tagged and towed 43 abandoned cars, but tagged many more cars than that. Often when an abandoned car is tagged, the owner recovers it, takes care of it themselves. 43 times last year, they did not, and the car was the action. The codes enforcement officer, again, one FTE, conducted 439 problem property inspections, listed 19 properties for the nuisance abatement process, initiating that formalized process where the city will come in and take care of things on their own if they have to. And actually did then abate 8 properties, which is a court action with contractors involved, and then that'll fund the money. And then, of course, the codes enforcement officer collaborated with animal control. Oftentimes we'll have crossover on those cases where it's an animal issue and it's a codes issue or a nuisance issue. And then also helped our partners in MOP and establish. Looking at the money for codes. Really, this has been stable. There's no nothing exciting to report here. The codes officer will be receiving hopefully a new car, which when I say new, it means it's being handed down out of our vehicle procurement plan, which is sort of the last car out for detectives, is the first car in for codes enforcement. And then I wanted to also call your attention to page 127 under other contractual services. It says towing of RVs for $15,000. As a part of our codes in the city of the Dalles, you're not allowed to park boats and RVs and other such vehicles on the road for more than a certain amount of time. There is a permitting process, but it's not a permanent solution to park those on the road. And oftentimes we'll see those become derelict and sort of scrapped, abandoned somewhere in town. Towing those is an expense out of the city of Dalles pocket. If we want to remove those and have them gone, the only solution is that the city pays for it. And that's what that line for $15,000 is. Slightly below that, let's just take the next line down. Youth services work through for graffiti abatement. The reason that the city of the Dalles is not currently covered in graffiti is because of that contract, which is very modest in my mind at $13,600. If a police officer, if you or anybody spots graffiti in the city of the Dalles and reports it to codes enforcement, that contract allows us to have people out there virtually immediately cleaning it up, abating that nuisance, painting it over, or removing it if possible. So $13,600 for that service. And then transient camp cleanup, the next line down, for $25,000. This is enough money to clean up approximately 50 camps. And these are the larger camps, the ones that can't just be done by hand, where it's horde of all sorts of trash, biohazard waste, sometimes pets and other things. And that's a contracted service or through a procurement process, somebody will bid on that job and come in and do it for us. And then that's under the supervision of codes and administrative services at the police department to get that work done. Not going too long. How are we on time? Questions on codes?
We'll take a break
That'd be good.
right after this.
Great.
Chair recognizes the mayor.
We had a contract with the county for graffiti abatement.
That is.
Oh, that's what that is?
Yes. County youth services.
Is that it's still in effect though? Because of the new legislation where about slavery, about using,
No, this is all paid work.
got it.
Going great.
All right. Anything else, chief?
Questions on codes? Hearing none.
Next,
So page 128, I call it dog control. It's really animal control because when we get a call for a pig or an ostrich or who knows what it is going down the road, it's going to be the animal control officer at the police department. This is a program of the police department is exactly one person, one FTE. And the mission I read as provide animal control, safety and education for the citizens of the Dalles. And then goals for fiscal year 2024. One of them was to promote dog licensing compliance with Home at Last. We've been looking at this program. Does anybody have a dog license? And since it is, you're one of 147 people in the Dalles that have a licensed dog. I think that there's probably more than that. We're working with Home at Last to shore up that program and try and increase compliance. And that's a revenue source for them. Well, if we want the animal shelter to go on and continue to be viable, to operate, we need them. They are a key partner. No Home at Last, there's no reason to have a dog control option. Nothing to do with the dog. So in 2023, we did transition our dog control officer from 0.75 FTE into a full-time position. That makes it much easier for us to pay a living wage for a person to do that job, recruit for it, and then also have that service available for our citizens when they need it. It's just an awful lot of dog calls. They just come in nonstop. And if not for the dog control officer, then it would be police officers running on those calls. And we like to keep our people safe first. Animals. And then that part, dog control is working with the city attorney to update our animal control ordinances. That's going to be a longer process as we go forward. Again, just one person, so the proposed budget is fairly straightforward, but I do call your attention to materials and services under contractual services. The city police department through animal control has a contract with Home at Last to lodge dogs that are caught out in the community, whether we get them as a stray or somebody turns them into us or it's a bite dog. No matter how we get it, we can take 15 dogs to the shelter every month. That number can't roll forward. If we only do 13, we don't get 17 the next month. So 15 flat rate, and then in excess of that, there's a fee schedule that tells us how much each additional dog will be. This contract is under review at this time. Late in the budget process, Home at Last came to us under I think Chair, Board President, asking to review that contract, which is permissible in that contract, and they're probably going to be looking for a small fee increase. And if that comes to pass, that's not reflected in this budget. It would be something to be back to the council and say, hey, guess what? Contract did get amended. Now it costs this much. All that here. There's a line for veterinarian services, $6,000. When we bring in dogs that are injured, hit by a car, abused, sick, diseased, before we can get them lodged at Home at Last, they have to be cleared by a veterinarian. Also, if we have a dog that simply cannot be rehomed through their adoption process because it's too vicious, too dangerous, then we pay that fee also to have that animal. That's what that money is about, $6,000, and that has been a challenge for us this year. Our dog control officers active. engaging in a lot of cases, and those costs seem to be going up. And the quality and care of the dogs that he's encountering seems to be going down. So more dogs that are in need of veterinary care are being encountered by him, and Home at Last is ensuring that those dogs are examined. That's reasonable, that's understandable, and that's why it's accounted for. Oh, I should tell you, we did have a truck. So we bought a dog control truck last year. Again, vehicles are just taking a tremendously long amount of time to get here. The truck now exists, although I haven't seen it, and it is being retrofitted for special duty dog use now. And I think it's in, yeah, at a specialty retrofitter, and we hope to have that. We hope to have it here a long time ago, but by the time we can get it here, we may be crossing the line the new budget year. But it's really beyond our control to do anything to make it happen faster.
Mayor Mays. Oh, let's go with Councilman Richardson.
Thank you. I don't know if this is a question for the chief or Matthew or Angie or all three at once, but if we have a potential or / likely fee increase at Home at Last, is it worth just bumping that up a little bit? We definitely, in my opinion, don't want to reduce our capacity for homing the animals.
I don't know how much more that's going to be. It's been a little bit of a odd contract negotiation process in that they wanted it revised and asked us to make first revision. So it's a very modest fee increase so far, very modest. And I just don't know where that's going to land. It may be something that we can just accommodate within that budget without having to make a change, and then just address it in the next full budget process, depending on how much it changes.
Mayor Mays, do you have a question or comment?
Matthew, were we approached by them about a bond measure or something like that?
Yes, and early last year, and some of the transitions I believe that they've been going through with their director and board, they did have very briefly a Dimes for Dogs concept ballot that they were considering based off a internal survey that they had done to gauge support for that. I think the survey was limited to just a couple hundred people who may have been on their mailing list, and so their tendency to support may be a little bit pre-selected, frankly. But I don't believe that is a effort that we're still undertaking. At least I haven't heard about it in 6 months. So they were contemplating that and engaging in some discussions, I think the November ballot, but here we are in May. I haven't heard anything. And those me for just one thing, if everybody could, page 54, which is our capital improvement plan for the police department, I want to highlight one area of worth watching. About halfway down, the in-car video storage, in-car video lease, body camera lease. Our vendor for this body camera that I'm wearing here was formerly WatchGuard. They were bought out by Motorola. Motorola is a very large blue blood police technology vendor. It's likely that those costs may go up in the future because obviously Motorola is in it to make money. WatchGuard was a small family company. And so there could be a change there in the future. It bears watching. Just like our tasers, they approach end of life because the taser is essentially a piece of technology that we carry with us. And as they age out and innovate and become better, then we're forced to move forward with what they're willing to support as a vendor too. So those two items, along with the CAD RMS, are things that are trending towards possible cost increases in the future. And sometimes when those market factors happen, it's really beyond our control to do anything about it other than, search the market space and look for a potential other vendor. But we do need those tools. And it's my opinion as chief of being in this community, I don't think that we can operate without body cameras and tasers. It's too much risk. It's too much scrutiny, and it's too much risk to our officers and the requirements of the district attorney's office are really virtually everything needs on tape. So those are items to keep an eye on in the future.
Anything else? All right. I think it's time we take a pause for a break. And we can come back at 7:30. Is that enough time? All right.
How many stalls do we have?
Or if you can't, also let us know that as well, so we can adjust.
Up after.
Oh, this is not a regular Reese's cup. It's a Take 5. It's got pretzels.
All right,
Caramel, peanut butter.
we are back and we are going to continue. Are we looking? We did the general fund, we did police, we did airport. What is next?
So looking at the next fund would be on page 74.
74.
That's the proposed budget worksheet for city council.
Get the red pen out for this one.
Roams across the whole room here.
Give us pens.
74.
Intentionally. We have a pen.
You have a red pen?
I don't have a red.
It requires a red pen.
I brought.
All right.
Any extra?
Who is going to report on the city council?
Believe I.
All right.
So looking at the city council budget, as I noted on page 74, starting at the top there under contractual services for expenditures is where I'll begin. You'll see detailed there different funding requests that we have received. I may add over the years that have, possibly some of them had kind of started as one-time funding requests, have developed into ongoing requests. And so we'll see that continued support for MCED Link, which is the public transit system that we have here. In particular, and if I may, let me just. And again, so you don't have to flip back and forth. I'll narrate this for you a little bit. In years past, we have typically funded MCED and Link public transportation at about $20,000 a year. This year, you will see that it's budgeted at $50,000. This is a result of some dialogue I had with Jessica Mehta at MCED and the availability of some additional grant funds this cycle that will support public transit in our community. And as such, they had that additional ask for $50,000 needed to provide the necessary match for that increase in federal funds this coming cycle. The Sister City program, that is something that has been on hiatus to a certain extent over the COVID pandemic years, but hope to re-engage and continue support of that program. Youth Think at $25,000. Fort Dalles displays, as we touched upon previously, at $25,000. Beautification Committee annual projects at 10, along with a tree plan or support for trees in our community, looking at the downtown core, but also the community overall at 20. You'll see that down lower on the list. And then doubling back, there is some additional support for contract for services that we have with the Dalles Art Center to help promote the development of public art installations throughout our community. And as such, that's the 15,000 is for contract for services for the effort to facilitate that development. So underneath it, you'll see $50,000 to support a project that they have been putting together for a couple of years now. And that's a pocket park or a small park on the corner of Washington and Second, I believe.
Third.
Second. Was that?
Oh, second.
Washington and
Oh,
Second.
okay.
And so that has been a project in the works for quite some time. Again, you'll notice on page 27 that there was a $150,000 or $120,000 budget ask. I budgeted that at 50, 25,000 as a continuation from last year and additional 25 this year, hoping to see them secure some additional grants.
Is that on the corner of J.C. Penney parking lot?
Yes.
All right,
So
now I
that is in
understand.
partnership with that private property.
Got it.
And then a relatively new request that we received or included is Open Campus and Juntos with OSU Extension. This is a new program that we received a request for, which provides support programs to increase high school and college degree attainment and really targeting the Latinx community here. So we wanted to be supportive of that program. And then finally, just today, I did receive a funding request that I wanted to bring your attention from the Youth Empowerment Shelter, or YES, for $25,000. This is a funding request I received literally this morning. It's not included in this budget, but I wanted to make the council or the budget committee aware that we did receive that request. So I will pause there and see if there are any questions about contractual service.
Mayor Mays, let me ask about this fresh. The yes or the youth empowerment that came in today, if it's not approved, would that be denied for the,
We did not include this in this budget. So if the budget committee was supportive of this yes request of 25,000, I would look for guidance from the budget committee on how to adjust funds allocated in this line item to make. If it was a request that I had received earlier in the budget development process,
Right.
something that it could have been more easily considered and incorporated, part of that overall effort to maintain a balanced budget. But as I received the request today, the budget books and the effort that we had put in had already been sent out.
all right, yes, please.
Well, my question is, we haven't received any information about what the, like, I haven't gotten any information about what the project is. I don't know that it would be appropriate for us to like make adjustments to the budget in other areas in order to accomplish. So I don't know, how do we consider that? Do we, is it necessary for us to consider that?
One thing that we could certainly do is I could make copies of what I received today to hand out to the budget committee. I could also briefly summarize if that helpful. And so this request is for $25,000 for the overall operation of our youth shelter and transitional housing service. They've had a shelter here since 2016. 2022, they provided 874 nights of shelter to 26 individual.
Many of these
So-
kids are without homes. Many of them are on the street. Their efforts are to have stability, and they also, there's an educational plan. So, and it's not only serving local, but there are students that come from other communities into that program. So it's a youth sheltering housing program for kids.
So where is
Hey.
their money coming from?
Their current funding?
Yes, you said they've been here since 2016. Why they now want something?
I don't know the breakdown offhand of their current funding portfolio, but to your point, they do note that the funding that the city could provide to them as part of their request would be used for overall operation of the agency, its programs and facilities, including expenses such as staff wages, rent, utilities, repairs and maintenance and programs. So as I noted when I began this section, oftentimes we do receive, could be one-time funding requests, and that is one way to consider those. Another way to consider is if the funding request is a recurring expense, something that an organization may rely upon and look to the city from here. And so this request does seem like more of a ongoing.
Recurring thing. And there's only one thing that looks like it could even be reduced to allow for that 25,000, and that's possibly the Dalles Art Center public art installation. There's nothing else that looks like it could be reduced. To
I have a
me,
little history on this. In the past, we received requests. They had a dishwasher that was not meeting standards for a group home. So they had to go to a commercial, and it was beyond what they could afford. And I think it was like $5,000. So the city did enter into a contract, and we did provide that for 1 year, but that was a one-time ask. So you had history in the past, but not ongoing funding sources like this, it appears to be.
and I guess I'd want to know more about where the funding has been coming from and why now they just need extra.
And I think this can be one of the challenges when a request like this is received so far along in the process.
Mhm.
One thing that we could certainly do moving forward is engage with yes comprehensively over the course of next year, incorporate potential requests such as this.
They're not going to be so desperate they're going to shut down or anything if they don't get into this year's budget, because it's another year away yet.
That's absolutely correct. It's a year away. I don't get a sense from the letter that they've submitted necessarily be eliminated without this funding.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm winding myself up for that, Mr. Mayor. I'm kind of a sucker when it comes to funding for kids, or at least I've become so, because I think the way that sort of culturally and socially and governmentally we deal with our kids is rotten. So I'm knee jerk inclined to say yes, except that we don't know anything about it and it's really late in the process. So I'd really like to encourage our staff to have a conversation with them and see sort of how desperate their need might be. We do have contingency funds in the budget. I'm certain that if it became a sort of existential need for the youth shelter, that we could hash that out either now or sometime over the course of the year. I'm confident you guys could figure that part out. I would like to, just for my own sake, if nothing else, make sure that we have a really solid process in future years for soliciting, filtering, or prioritizing these community and cultural requests. It's something that we've not really ever had. It's been sort of hit and miss. This is my fourth budget cycle, and it's the first time we've not gotten into an extended conversation over fireworks funding. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
I do note that the fireworks amount is the exact same amount as the youth empowerment shelter. So we could yet have a discussion. But my point is, I would like to see us for future budgets have a really clear process for when requests are due, what kind of requests, and that would go for anybody in the community. It would go for counselors, it'd go for nonprofits seeking some help.
Well, I have a little more information. We are a public benefit non-profit organization registered in the state of Oregon. We serve youth of the Mid-Columbia Gorge region, including 6 counties on both sides of the Columbia River: Wasco, Hood River, Sherman, Gilliam, Klickitat, and Scomadia. And then on the front page, it tells a little bit about what they do at the empowerment. Youth Empowerment Shelter provides youth in the Columbia River Gorge a place of physical and emotional safety while assisting them to build positive relationships and develop their individual potentials. So that gives you an idea, but it doesn't tell me funding sources.
In the letter here, there's a brief sentence that details some of those sources. They quote, "Wide variety of sources, including local business and individual giving, government and private foundation grants, small fundraisers, and local faith congregations."
I think for the future, I don't know if we can accommodate this year, but for the future, I think that we would send them a message to come back and in enough time to be considered in the regular process. That's.
Did you want to go? Did you have?
Oh, Mayor
Well, my
Mason.
question got answered, and I think between the city manager's suggestion and Dan's suggestion, I think, and you just kind of summed it up. I'm okay with that too.
Right.
I had a comment.
Yes, please.
And the only thing I'd say in terms of advice for any protocols for deadlines for submissions and whatnot is precisely this kind of situation where you would have your typical, submission process, but then your emergency submission process. So we would find out in this letter that, oh my God, they've got an emergency and now we really do have to consider it at the last minute. So there wouldn't be any sort of hard deadline 3 months ago, accommodate for emergencies, but this does not sound to me like an emergency.
I wouldn't disagree with that statement. And I guess the only other piece I would add there is that there would be a certain degree of precedent or practice there in looking at every potential nonprofit that we have for those funds. So there's no judgment or comment there about yes itself, but just a lot of different nonprofits that all have varying degrees of funding challenges. And are in that kind of situation, and we can provide support to yes, maybe a very appropriate question or answer for that time. But it would also establish that practice of providing support to nonprofits when they are in financial. needs. I'm not saying that's a bad decision or a good decision, but
A little history in the past, this has been this contingency grouping was a decision of the council. And then it was moved over to city manager. And the city manager takes the input and makes a final decision on these funds, correct?
well, and so what I'll add there is that this is indeed in the city council's budget. On page 27, where I have that chart, I've tried to include not only the recommendations that I have, which are in the city
Right.
council's budget, but funding requests that we received at the time this budget went out, what the total amount was and what my recommendation. So looking down that sheet, you'll see the requested amount from years prior and my recommendation. You'll see some changes there with Youth Think, with Art Center and satellite office in the Dalles as part of Safe Spaces. Yes is not included in that chart, as I said.
Your recommendation in this particular case then?
For yes,
Yes.
for the youth empowerment shelter, we could certainly fund that request. I'd like to confer with the finance director on potentially where those funds could potentially come from. Unless there was a recommendation from the budget committee on adjusting some of the other line items in this contractual services amount. I do pause though on ongoing general support.
Hmm.
Some of the other requests that we have, it's to leverage additional grant dollars or to complete the project. More easily, I can recommend those favor more easily when it's that type of.
I'm not in favor of taking away funds in established areas that you've already budgeted. So it would have to be looking for contingency or additional funds. That's what you're suggesting, I think, Counselor.
I'm really suggesting we need to, the council and staff need to look at the contingency process. And maybe that's a work session, not tomorrow, but sometime this coming year, and sort of hash through how we want to accept and receive these.
Yes, please.
So I agree with the things that have already been said, and I just wanted to add that it sounds like that they serve 6 counties, 3 on each side of the river. Did I hear that correctly?
Say that last part again.
That yes, serves 6 different counties.
Yes.
And so I wondered if the request has only been made of the city of the Dalles, or if a request has been made to some of these other areas that are served.
I currently don't know the answer.
Okay.
So we have another step. This is a recommendation that goes to city council. That gives us some time, correct? So we could, as a city council, come back and say, we'll take this back up and review at that particular time or not.
And I may defer to finance director on ultimately the budget committee recommending a particular budget
Right.
and adjustments that may occur between then and when city option.
That's not a good standard to follow, but
I mean, if we make adjustments after the budget.
yeah. I
Right,
withdraw.
about coming back and
Yeah, I withdraw that. I don't think we want to go down that path.
Maybe it's something we table tonight and, bring it back up tomorrow as you get more through the budget. Because there are budget changes, sorry.
Sorry.
okay.
I suggest, maybe if you guys wanted to table it tonight, it's something that you guys could bring up, tomorrow night when you guys are in your budget meeting again, when we get closer to
I think that-
finalizing the budget.
and we've had far more of the budget completely presented to.
I think that's sound reasoning. And it also adjusts for any concerns that we have. So we can take this up, table it tonight and then move on and look at it perhaps tomorrow night.
Okay, we will make note of that.
Parking
Right.
lot.
Okay. Director, are there any more questions before we move on? Yeah. Debbie.
So a question about what does MCED plan to do with the additional funds that they have requested and the grant that the funds are matching?
So the additional funds in the next, so I'll just quote from their letter here. In the next 2 years, we plan to again increase service as a result of the larger grants. Dial-A-Ride service will add 3 hours each weekday and service on Sundays. And that will also serve the needs of the Dalles from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays and 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekends. They're also planning to deploy some additional bus shelters that we've seen in some segments of the community. And they're working to upgrade their bus fleet with hybrid vehicles. They'll add hours to the Dalles bus routes and increase service elsewhere in Moscow County. Launch a self-serve scheduling mobile app.
All right. Mayor Mays, anything else? Good. All right. Let us continue on then.
Okay, thank you. Continuing in the city council's budget, we've continued to budget funds for not only labor negotiations, but employment-related issues that we may have. Like I mentioned a moment ago, we did complete the police union contract negotiations last year. Are still having ongoing negotiations with SEIU this year, but we hope to make good progress on that. Wanted to keep resources available for our labor attorney and to help address any issues that arise. Going through a process for auditing services and are hoping to finalize that contract as soon as we can. And you'll see detailed down below, travel, food and lodging, training, and conference for the city council, League of Oregon Cities. We've continued to budget for trips to Washington, DC as part of that community outreach team. And I'm hoping to see some additional engagement from the city on that community outreach team, helping with some of the logistical organization for that trip, as well as generally being more engaged and involved at the state level in the years going forward. Oh, back up a little bit. Oh, no, sorry, on page 75, you'll see a change in safety supplies and equipment. I'm reflecting a change with the safe dividends that we received. Pretty much detailed there in blue. We're hoping to use, we'll be using the majority or all of those funds. Citywide security lock upgrade, police department, city hall, and public works and other facilities to install essentially 4 fob readers, card readers, help better secure our facilities, monitor who's coming and going, have some of the staff areas.
I have a little information on that as well, and it's a matter of the accountability on the police chief, Tom Worthy, on the accreditation process that was identified as increasing the lock systems on different parts of their building.
Yes, sir, especially around inventory and asset control and evidence.
Thank you. Okay.
And I think that concludes my overview of the city council budget. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Anyone? Questions?
I didn't see your salaries on here.
There's stipends, there's meals, there's travel.
$92.33.
That's net now. Gross is $100.
It was $100 per month. All right.
My apologies. I think the last comment I may make is down under workshops. You'll see some funds in strategic planning and workshops. That could speak directly to Councilor Richardson's comment a moment ago about having some city council work sessions or strategic planning in addition to the annual city council goal setting process that we go through. That could tackle some of these exact topics.
Okay. Next.
City clerk. I said city clerk. There's,
Approaching.
Well, okay, we were about 4 minutes to 8. May I get the city clerk to read the provision in our ordinances about moving the meeting to the next night, adjourning and then coming back?
so you can only go until 8 o'clock. And then you need to make a decision. If everyone agrees, then, or the most people agree, then you can go on, but you have to do it in, I think, 1 hour increments.
That's true. So we need to have a discussion on, we are now at just about at the witching hour. So what we need to do is make a decision. Do we continue on or do we adjourn for tonight and then bring it back tomorrow night? Where are we in the process? How far would you consider that we are? About halfway?
No.
So you've just got
Well,
started.
we're going to put, no, we're going to put him on a leash. Right. So,
2 hours.
okay. So about where are we in the expected?
Considering this is my first year as your city manager, I'm gonna punt that question to our finance director.
I feel like we have at least one more evening.
One more evening?
Yes.
All right, so I'll take, is there anyone that would like to make a suggestion that we adjourn for tonight and continue tomorrow night? Or do we continue? So what's your pleasure? I'm seeking consensus.
Yeah,
Either
I
go
would
till
vote
nine
for
or
another
tomorrow.
night.
Another night, another night,
Oh, yeah.
another night, another
Yes,
night, another
yes.
night. Counselor Richardson,
I prefer to spread it out over as many nights as possible.
you can come back every night for the next month.
Gotta refresh the treats.
All right. And Mayor Mays, are you,
I don't have an opinion,
Get the
sir.
vote.
Mayor Mays?
I think the rate we're going, we're going to be here Wednesday.
Yeah.
Think so?
Personal opinion.
Well,
Hmm.
we're going to put, like I said, Dave on a leash. So, all right. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to adjourn.
No.
We'll,
You'll be recessing till tomorrow
Oh,
at
yes.
5:30.
I am going, yes, dear. I'm going to recess until tomorrow night. This meeting is recessed.
Yep.
Job.
Hit it that far.
Just break a gavel.
I broke it.
Oh, you did not.
Break my gavel.
It's your gavel.